Hello, everyone. This is Tony Abad, the Digital Diplomat. Thank you for joining us again on our show. And today we have a special guest to talk about a very important topic of negotiating contracts cross-border. So as you know, we are promoting a world that comes together, a world that is integrating. And we're privileged and honored to have with us Lona Andersen, who is coming to us from the magical mountains of Chiang Mai, Thailand. Lona is the managing partner for the Asia Pacific for Step Forward Partners. But more importantly, I think she brings with us many years of experience as an intercultural expert who will bring to us the concept of or trying to apply this to fintech and to software, and particularly about you are promoting the digitalization of banking and financial services. But let me stop here and let me hear more about what you've been up to most recently. Lona Andersen, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me onto your show. I've been watching some of the past ones, and very interesting people that you talk to. So what have I been up to recently? Before COVID, I exited sort of the corporate world, as in working for them, and now I'm the managing partner for Step Forward, as you said, and we are a small consultancy where we work with banks across the world in selecting software, in delivering software solutions for them from a digital perspective. In particular, at the moment, the banking world has a huge task that they need to transform digitally around the world from the legacy systems. Banking software is a very sticky business. Mm-hmm. It sits in the bank for maybe up to 30, 40, even 50 years. They'll be running the same product that might have had upgrades, but essentially it's the same product, and they'll have been working with the same customer. So I worked in that industry for 30 years, and so I know, I have had firsthand experience of banks all over the world and how the cultural landscape is in each country, in each bank. And then you go to countries like Australia, where there's a convergence of nationalities and cultures. So you go into a negotiating room, and it's not just an Australian who sits there, it's an Australian with a Chinese background, it's an Australian with an Indian background, with a Filipino background, and so on. And so you have all of these cultures converging in a negotiation situation. So you need to have what I call a cultural fluency in order to do successful negotiations.
Oh, that's exactly what we're all about here, Lona. Well, we have a main question here about what makes contract negotiation an important skill for cross-border business. But I think it speaks to the whole negotiation process. And as you've pointed out, the reality is when we're in a negotiating room or even in video, we're here talking to people of different, not just different nationalities, but different ethnicities and cultures. No? So as a trade lawyer myself, I've witnessed negotiations for agreements. But that's, as a lawyer, we think differently. But I think from your background and what, that you are actually talking about fintech and software, I think it has a different perspective. So what makes contract negotiation particularly important nowadays in cross-border business?
Let's just talk about contracting first, right, and negotiations. Number one, you always have to ensure that there is a positive outcome for both sides. Now, if I think back to the early days in my career in the Western world, it was all about winning, right? So you had to come out top from a negotiation. But if you won, the other guy lost, right? And that's not a winning combination in order to make both sides feel like they got something out of the negotiation itself, right? So you then move out here into Asia, where you're looking at multiple cultures, and you also have contracting law, right? And as a contract lawyer, you'll know that you need to embed your contract in a law, right? So it might be the law of Singapore, it might be the law of Thailand, it might be the law of China, all depending. And that has huge consequences for the actual contract and how it's going to be treated. I've even had contract negotiations in Bangladesh where they've insisted on international maritime law being applied to the contract for a piece of software that was a little strange, but that's what they wanted, right? And so you need to accommodate what they do. But what I think that one of the things that you need to think about to be successful in cross-border negotiations is that you need to understand what is it that the other person is looking for, right? You need to think contract negotiations the first time you talk to this future prospect, right? So it could be a renegotiation for a license contract, it could be a service contract, it could be anything, right? And it could be an existing customer, which means that they have a view of how you are. It could also be a brand new customer. And if it's brand new, you need to make sure that you understand that company's culture, that you get to know the people who are going to be sitting around the negotiating table with you. And you need to start, in effect, negotiating the terms long before you sit at a table. It's all about people. It's all about emotions, right? And people bring their personal feelings into onto that table. And you, as the negotiator, the chief negotiator for your company, you need to keep that tapped down, right? So that you're not antagonistic, that you don't feel upset when they're trying to suggest something to you. So you need to think about how does that country view contracts. I've actually been in a situation where I was standing and talking to an account manager who then simply says, yes, but our contract is only just it's just a guideline. And I'm sort of going, thinking that there's just no way this is a guideline, right? Because if we do not agree on something, we will end up in a court of law. And that's really the reason why you have a contract, right? To set out the reasons for what you're doing and what you are obliged to deliver as part of that contract from both sides.
Yeah. Well, Lona, you've given me a very important takeaway. As a lawyer, we're always like sharpening our knives, right? And going to the negotiating rooms, that we have to make sure that we get the best price. We have to make sure that we come out on top. But what you're saying is actually that you should already envision a complete contract where both parties or all the parties satisfied and feel that everyone's won, everyone's come out of it with what they wanted to.
Yes,
and it changes the way you approach the whole negotiation process. For us, we're always trying to make sure that these are our non-negotiables, etc. We have to fight for these, but actually, it's trying to come together and come up with a mutually satisfying agreement.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the thing is, so you also have to think about things like the people who are going to go into the negotiating room, right? You need to investigate who these people are from your counterparts so that you understand who they are. Today in the digital world, right? I mean, everybody is online somewhere, whether it's on LinkedIn or it's on some form of social media, right? So you need to go and find who are these people. You need to talk to people who know them already. Our mutual friend in Singapore, if I was negotiating with him, I know exactly how he negotiates and so on, right? So you need to understand who's coming into the room, what are their objectives, because the person who's buying the piece of software, he's got a budget and he's got an objective and what he needs to do. And at the end of the day, if you're a bank, you've got a customer at the other end. That could be a corporate, that could be a private wealth customer, that could be a consumer customer. And they need to service those customers, right? So it's not just about me and you. It's about the whole all of what is happening with that piece of software, right? Sometimes the software is just something that happens in the background. But the majority of the software that I've been involved with has all been where customers are directly impacted by the implementation of these pieces of software.
Right. So it's not just the software provider, the developer, and the bank, but you're actually looking at this whole population of depositors and borrowers. I mean, you have to think about the welfare of those who
Mm.
use the fintech that you're introducing.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because if you understand how it's going to be used in the bank, what is the bank's objective? What are they trying to achieve? If you know that, right, then then it's easier for you to position what you've got in a light where it'll be seen as a positive proposition, right? And it'll allow you to preempt hard stops from the bank's perspective, right? And you know, at the end of the day, the price is the least worry of mine in any form of negotiation. It's all about. I mean, look, we're negotiating a marriage contract. Right, it's as simple as that. You know, and this is a prenup, right? So
Right.
you need to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the actual life of this contract, right? It doesn't interfere with the your customer's ability to actually deliver the service that they need. And trying to win in the old school way of negotiating doesn't work anymore, and particularly not about cross-border, right?
You mentioned a really interesting term, which is cultural fluency. How do you explain cultural fluency?
Okay, so a little bit about my background, right? So my father worked for the United Nations, so I grew up in Asia and in Africa, and every few years we would move to a new country, and I would have to learn not just a new language, but a new culture every single time. And the person who moves from somewhere, whether it's from China or from Europe to any country in the world, and this could be Indonesia, it could be Kenya. You need to understand how the culture works in that country, and you need to accept that it works like that, and don't impose your own cultural backgrounds and norms on it. As you mentioned, I live in Thailand, and Thai culture is very specific in terms of how you hire people, how you negotiate with people, and who you are talking to. So you need to understand that. There's been some fantastic books written over times about how you negotiate and how you work with different cultures, but you should always investigate where you're going, how do they negotiate, and don't get despondent when your Korean counterpart comes back for the 5th time to want to renegotiate the contract. This is standard, right? But if you didn't know that, you'd be in despair, and you would be making the wrong moves, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Given your experience, especially in intercultural sort of negotiation relationships, I wanted to ask for maybe one or two interesting stories wherein you faced a challenge and you were able to overcome it precisely with the kind of principles that you've been applying in your professional life.
One situation where I had a large room, I was negotiating, we had our lawyer with us, who was not disruptive in any form. He was very supportive and would answer questions from my side. But I had another person with me who was very, very disruptive. And kept on wanting to go into this sort of, Western style. No, just give it to them. Just give it to them. I want this deal. And I'm sort of thinking, yes, but I need a deal that's good for me and for them. So actually, I threw him out. I simply said, no, I need you to leave. Right. And so that did two things for me. Now, number one, the people in the room were uncomfortable with the disruptive presence. And this guy was senior to me in my organization. Right. But I politely asked him to leave and simply said, I think I need you to leave. We need to discuss this here. I'll call you back in when we're ready to present the final things. What that did was we removed the disruptive presence and the uncomfortable feeling that prospective customer felt was all gone, right? And that then opened up the discussion for, number one, respect for me for the fact that I'd thrown out a boss, and the talk about the fact that they could now talk to somebody who was actually listening to them.
It's sort of I don't know, I said like a bad cop, good cop.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, a negotiation is a negotiation, right? It is. You can bring somebody like that successfully. You can bring somebody like that into a situation and tell them, you need to do this and this, and I'll throw you out. Absolutely.
Okay, you have to
Not
bring
a
your
problem.
you're the mean boss. You're coming with me. Then I'm
That's
throwing you
right.
out.
Yeah. I mean, one guy, I just said, just go away, we're fine. Though I also had a situation where I was in a negotiating room about a contract with a group of people from a culture that are very loud and very confrontational, right? It got to the stage where other people from the office would come in and simply sit and ask me if I needed help. And they were insulted, the fact that somebody said that I needed help, right? No, I was their best friend, and they were just being very, very vocal about about what they needed and what they thought and so on. I have always been well received in that bank, right? So it's just about understanding and making sure that everybody understands what's going on.
Before we end our short conversation, I wanted to ask you to maybe address our audience and suggest maybe one important tip, one important piece of advice that you can give our young professionals or those who are similarly placed negotiating these kinds of intercultural contracts and agreements, or how to begin professionally to engage in what you have been doing all these years.
This thing is two facets of the same coin, right? Obviously, anything to do with legal entities and all that kind of stuff, let's forget about that. Though important, let's talk about, so how do you negotiate? Number one, you leave your ego outside of the room. And then you bring your ears and you listen to what the other party is saying. And you listen very carefully. And if you don't understand what they're saying, you ask them to clarify. Half the time, the people who are negotiating with you are not seasoned negotiators. So you need to listen to them, and you need to take into account their emotions to understand how best to frame your side of the argument so that it makes a win-win for both sides, right? So ego out, ears open.
Ego out, ears open.
Yes.
I'll have to remind myself that as well.
Every time you walk in.
Every time I walk in the negotiating room. But like I said, it's maybe it's a bad habit for lawyers to always want to do the sort of win game.
If the customer feels that they have won, this is a good deal. Right?
Yes.
If the customer feels comfortable, you've got a good deal for yourself, but the customer also feels that they have won a good deal, because like I said, it's a marriage. You're going to be in this, and particularly in the software world, right? If you're selling a core banking system or a loan application and things like that, this is a long-term relationship, right? You're looking at 30, 40 years.
Lona Andersen, thank you so much for sharing your precious time with us today. I hope we'll be able to have you on the show again.
Anytime.
Or perhaps we'll have another TCP growth event where you could be with us, and maybe it could be more interactive, because we need to share these skills, these experiences with many more who are also on the negotiating path.
Yes, that's very true. Very true. These are great skills for people to have.
That was our show for today. Thank you for being with us on the Digital Diplomat. If you like what you've watched, what you're interested in the topic, please don't forget to follow us, TCP Growth, on YouTube, LinkedIn, and other social media. And please leave a message. And we'll look forward to seeing you again at our next show.